6. Mythical creatures that really existed, Part 11. Some legends are warnings, some are explanations, and some, the ones that have survived the longest, that appear in the most places, that refuse to die no matter how many times science tries to close the file, are something else entirely. They are records, imperfect, translated through generations, distorted by time and fear and the limits of language, but records nonetheless, of something that was there. Tonight, 6 more creatures. 6 more records from 6 different corners of the world, and 6 more reasons to read the legends more carefully. Creature Duster 1. The Beast of Gévaudan. This creature isn't a legend at all. It was real. It was documented. It killed over 100 people in 18th century France, and nobody agrees on what it actually was. Between 1764 and 1767, in the remote Margeride Mountains of the Gévaudan region in south-central France, something killed people. Not one person, not a handful. Over 100 confirmed victims, with dozens more suspected. The attacks were consistent in their brutality and their specific targeting. The creature went for the throat and the head, dragging victims away from groups, returning to the same areas repeatedly, and demonstrating a boldness toward humans that no known French predator of the era had ever shown. The attacks were so severe, so frequent, and so inexplicable that King Louis XV sent professional wolf hunters, then dragoons, then his own personal lieutenant of the hunt to deal with what the region had come to call la bête, the beast. The Beast of Gévaudan is not a legend in the traditional sense because its attacks were documented in real time. Parish death records, police reports, military dispatches to Versailles, survivor testimonies taken by magistrates. The kills are recorded with the same administrative precision that 18th century French bureaucracy applied to everything. What the records don't agree on is what the beast looked like. Survivors described it as the size of a donkey or a calf, with reddish fur, a broad head, a wide chest, and a tail that curved upward. None of those features match a wolf. The animal the official narrative settled on after a large wolf was killed in 1767 and the attack stopped. The debate about what the beast actually was has never been fully resolved. Leading theories include a hyena escaped from a private menagerie. Hyenas were kept as exotic pets by French aristocracy in the 18th century, match the size and behavioral descriptions, and have a bite capable of producing exactly the skull-crushing injuries the victims exhibited. Others argue for a lion, a large dog-wolf hybrid, or an early example of a predator that had lost its fear of humans through previous contact. One theory, advanced seriously by multiple researchers, proposes that the beast was a trained animal, deliberately used as a weapon by a local nobleman. A theory supported by the suspicious timing of its appearance and disappearance alongside the movements of a specific family in the region. Over 100 people died. The beast was real. What it was remains officially unsettled. Creature number 2, the Chupacabra. The next creature attacked livestock across 3 continents, terrified entire communities, and was eventually explained by science. But the explanation raised questions nobody expected. In March 1995, in the town of Canovanas in Puerto Rico, 8 sheep were found dead in a field. Their bodies were unmarked except for 3 small puncture wounds on each, and they had been, according to the farmer who found them, completely drained of blood. Within months, similar attacks were being reported across Puerto Rico, then across the Caribbean, then across Latin America, then across the southern United States. The creature responsible was named by a Puerto Rican comedian, El Chupacabra, the goat sucker, but the name stuck because the attacks kept coming, and the descriptions from witnesses who claimed to see the attacker were consistent enough to be alarming. A bipedal creature, 3 to 4 feet tall with large red eyes, gray skin, spines along its back, and a hissing, sulfurous smell. The Puerto Rican Chupacabra, the original bipedal, alien-looking version, has never been confirmed by physical evidence. But here's what happened when scientists began examining the carcasses of animals found across Texas, New Mexico, and the wider American South in the 2000s and 2010s, killed in ways consistent with Chupacabra reports. The explanation they found was genuinely unexpected. DNA analysis of the creatures responsible, in multiple confirmed cases, identified them as coyotes. Not normal coyotes. Coyotes in the advanced stages of sarcoptic mange, a parasitic infestation that causes complete hair loss, severe skin thickening, a distinctive smell, and, critically, a change in hunting behavior. Mange-infected coyotes lose the ability to hunt effectively and shift to easier prey, livestock, pets, attacking in ways and at times they normally wouldn't. A hairless coyote, seen at night by a frightened farmer, looks nothing like a coyote. It looks like something that has no name. But the original Puerto Rican sightings, the bipedal creature with the red eyes, weren't coyotes, and they remain unexplained. The most compelling theory connects them to a film. Species, a 1995 science fiction horror film featuring an alien creature with spines on its back and red eyes, was released in Puerto Rico shortly before the first Chupacabra reports. The creature witnesses described matched the film's monster with a precision that researchers found charitably remarkable. The livestock deaths were real. The blood loss was real. The fear was real. But the creature people saw may have been what fear and a recently watched film did to the real mangy animal that was actually responsible. Creature number 3. The Curupira. The next creature has feet that point backwards, and for 500 years, it has been protecting the Amazon more effectively than any law ever written. In the forests of Brazil, the Curupira is one of the most specifically and consistently described mythical beings in indigenous tradition, and one of the most practically useful. It is depicted as a small, wild-haired boy with bright red or orange hair, and its most distinctive feature, its feet are on backwards, with its heels pointing forward and its toes pointing behind it. It lives in the deep forest, and it protects it. Hunting hunters who take more than they need, leading poachers in circles until they are hopelessly lost, producing sounds and illusions that drive intruders mad with disorientation. It has no interest in people who approach the forest respectfully and take only what they need. It has absolute devastating interest in those who don't. The backwards feet are the key to understanding what the Curupira actually does, not as a creature, but as a system. The footprint it leaves in the forest floor points in the opposite direction to its actual movement. Anyone tracking the Curupira will follow its prints in the wrong direction, moving deeper into the forest rather than finding their way out. This detail, so specific, so practically described, so unlike the vague supernatural features of most mythical creatures, reads less like a monster description and more like a navigation trap. The Curupira's most dangerous feature is not its strength or its speed, but its ability to make the forest illegible to those who don't belong in it. The Curupira appears in the records of the first Portuguese missionaries to enter Brazil in the 16th century. The Jesuit José de Anchieta documented it in 1560, describing indigenous communities' genuine fear of the being and the behavioral codes it enforced. Those behavioral codes were, in ecological terms, a sophisticated, sustainable hunting system. Take what you need, don't overhunt, respect the forest's regenerative capacity. The Curupira was the enforcement mechanism for rules that kept the Amazon functional for thousands of years before the concept of conservation existed. Today, with the Amazon under pressure it has never faced in human history, the Curupira is increasingly invoked in Brazilian environmental activism, not as a legend to believe in, but as a framework to return to. The forest's oldest protector is still working. The question is whether anyone is still listening. Creature number 4, the Tikbalang. The next creature makes you lose your mind in the forest. And in 2016, a Philippine search and rescue team spent 3 days looking for a hiker who was found 2 kilometers from where he started, walking in circles. He remembered nothing. In the dense forests and rural roads of the Philippines, there is a creature that doesn't need claws or teeth to destroy you: the Tikbalang. Tall as a tree with the head of a horse on a human body and knees that bend the wrong way, it stands at crossroads and old trees at dusk, and those who encounter it find themselves unable to navigate, not confused, not turned around, completely, terrifyingly lost on roads they have walked 100 times, walking in circles, returning to the same clearing, moving for hours and going nowhere. The forest has become a trap, and the Tikbalang is the reason. In 2016, Philippine search and rescue teams spent 72 hours searching for a hiker who had gone missing on a trail he knew well, in daylight, less than 3 kilometers from the trailhead. When they found him, he was 2 kilometers from his starting point, having walked for 3 days in a loop so precise it was almost geometrical. He was physically unharmed. He had no memory of most of the time that had passed. He could not explain the loop. Local guides who assisted in the search said immediately, "Tikbalang." The rescue team filed their report without that word, but the loop was real. The missing hours were real. What makes the Tikbalang case scientifically fascinating is the remedy the tradition prescribes: turn your clothes inside out. On the surface, this sounds like pure superstition. But here is what it actually does. It forces you to stop, to perform a deliberate physical action that requires conscious attention to orientation: which side is front, which is back, which way you are facing. In conditions of genuine spatial disorientation, produced in dense Philippine forest by infrasound from the canopy, by the absence of navigational landmarks, by heat and dehydration, that forced moment of conscious orientation is exactly the neurological reset that breaks the loop. The cure for the Tikbalang works. Not because of magic, because the Tikbalang was never magic. It was what the forest does to a mind that stops paying attention. And in the Philippines, that forest is still doing it. Creature number 5, the Vodyanoi. The next creature is a Slavic water spirit blamed for every drowning in Eastern Europe for 1,000 years. And the behavior it describes matches a real phenomenon that still kills people today. Across the rivers, lakes, and mill ponds of Eastern Europe, in Russia, Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, and the wider Slavic world, there is a water being that has been described with remarkable consistency since the earliest written records of Slavic culture: the Vodyanoi. It appears as an old man, green-skinned or covered in algae, with a long beard tangled with water plants, sometimes with frog-like features, sometimes draped in a coat of river mud. It lives in the deepest parts of rivers and lakes, and it drowns people. Specifically, it is said to pull swimmers down from below, gripping their legs and dragging them into the cold darkness. It is most active at night, most dangerous in midsummer, and completely indifferent to the suffering of its victims. The Vodyanoi's behavior, pulling swimmers down from below, describes something very specific about how drowning actually happens in the river systems of Eastern Europe. River hydraulics in deep, cold, freshwater systems produce underwater currents, eddies, and temperature layers that are completely invisible from the surface. Cold water, significantly colder than the surface layer in summer, sits at the bottom of deep rivers and lake basins. And the boundary between warm surface water and cold deep water, called the thermocline, can be encountered suddenly by a swimmer who dives or is pulled below a certain depth. The sudden cold produces a shock response, gasping, muscle cramp, rapid heart rate, that can cause even a strong swimmer to lose control almost instantly. The Vodyanoi's grip, felt as an invisible force pulling from below, is the thermocline. The cold that takes the warmth from the body is the cold water layer below it. The Vodyanoi was also associated in many regional traditions with specific locations, particular bends in rivers, specific deep pools, certain mill ponds where the water was known to behave unpredictably. These locations were avoided. The avoidance was practical. The spots identified as Vodyanoi territory were precisely the spots where river hydraulics were most dangerous, where the current created invisible underwater turbulence, where the thermocline was shallowest, where the combination of depth and current made recovery after a swimming accident most difficult. The Vodyanoi marked the dangerous water. For 1,000 years, that marking kept people away from exactly the places where the water was most likely to kill them. Creature number 6, the adlet. The final creature tonight is half human, half dog, and the discovery that changed everything about this legend was made not by a folklorist, but by a DNA analyst studying a 10,000-year-old bone. In the oral traditions of the Inuit peoples of the eastern Arctic, across Greenland, Nunavut, and the Hudson Bay region, there exists a being that occupies an uncomfortable space between human and animal, the adlet. Described as the offspring of an Inuit woman and a large red dog, the adlet are hybrid beings, human from the waist up, dog from the waist down, that live at the edges of the human world. They are fast, they run in packs, and they hunt with a combination of animal instinct and human intelligence that makes them more dangerous than either alone. Communities that encountered them described the experience the same way every time. It wasn't the speed that was terrifying. It was the strategy. Here is where the fossil record enters in a way that nobody expected. In 2015, a team of geneticists analyzing ancient DNA from wolf and dog remains across the Arctic published a paper in the journal Science that produced results nobody had predicted. The domestication of dogs, the evolutionary split between wolves and dogs, occurred not once but possibly twice in 2 separate locations at 2 separate times. And in the Arctic specifically, the genetic evidence suggested a period of overlap between early domesticated dogs and wild wolves that produced hybrid populations. Animals that were neither fully wolf nor fully dog, that lived in proximity to human settlements without being domestic, that hunted in coordinated packs with a behavioral flexibility that pure wolves didn't demonstrate. A pack of large Arctic canids, wolf-dog hybrids, living near human communities, hunting with the strategic coordination of wolves and the human proximity boldness of dogs, would have been one of the most dangerous and inexplicable things an Inuit community could encounter. Too smart for a wolf, too wild for a dog. Hunting with a purpose that felt wrong, felt intentional, felt human. The adlet is what a 10,000-year-old Inuit community called an animal that science only found the DNA for in 2015. The legend was describing something real for 10 millennia before the genetics caught up. That's not mythology. That's a record. 6 creatures. 6 records from 6 different traditions. And the same lesson, one more time. The legends were never just stories. They were the best available technology for documenting a world that hadn't been named yet. The next video is already waiting. Don't go anywhere.